what were women doing? For example, I'm sitting with this woman and she's telling me that her husband was an ex-militant or her son was an ex-militant. Get rid of radical elements inside their homes while simultaneously being sexually abused by the same person. I think if I was at her place, I would have lost it. I was a hijabi child.
Kashmir is often discussed through the language of borders, security, and geopolitics. But what happens when we shift the lens from territory to testimony, from conflict to the women who live its consequences every day? That's exactly what Defying Dualities begins. That's our book in discussion today. Our guest today is Tehmeena Rizvi, Senior Policy Analyst and final year PhD scholar with Bennett University. Takes us beyond headlines and political narratives to the everyday lives of Kashmiri women whose stories reveal extraordinary resilience, agency, and strength. Welcome to the Books and Banter, a Dialogues digital original series. Tehmeena, it's wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
To start with, let's make it a fun conversation. Um, if Defying Dualities had a soundtrack, what would be the first song in your mind?
I think something from the movie Durandar, because Kashmiri women are very rebellious in their nature, but they have often been portrayed as victims or women who are very simple. I
Right.
don't actually consider them very simple, and they're very complex and dynamic in their behavior.
That's an interesting start. So, if there is one misconception about Kashmir that you wish people would stop repeating, what would that be in your opinion?
I think this place has often been looked at in terms of tourism, in terms of food culture. Say, for example, when we talk about Kashmir, we would probably mention apples, walnuts, mountains, the valleys.
Dal Lake.
Yeah, Dal Lake, and then Gulmarg, Pahalgam, just about it. And people are not really aware about lot of socio-political incidents happening around. Kashmir has a deep history, which includes a lot of cultural shifts, socio-political shifts, which also includes a lot of deep history about literacy. And we had a very different genre of writers in this place who would write poetry, and then the culture of Sufism, of course. But current situation, I think whenever people are trying to look at Kashmir, either it's from the tourism angle or else it's all security angle, which some days triggers me, because no doubt it's a conflict region, it is a security situation, but then there's a human cost attached to it. There are people living in this place. And like I mentioned, all these people are so dynamic in nature, particularly women, each one of them being very different in their own way, contributing to their lives and contributing to lives outside this place as well, in Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, outside India. We have lot of creators, in fact, who are producing such good, I would say, music, poetry, and movies. There are a lot of people, in fact, in Bollywood who have recently started producing music for Bollywood. So it's not primarily the mountains, apples, and walnuts. So I see it as a reductionist lens. No doubt it is a very beautiful place, I agree. But to only see it through a tourism lens is something very reductionist.
So, if I understand correctly, what you're essentially trying to say is that the human angle from a historical perspective has limited literature, and that
Yes.
is what your book aims to,
Yeah.
kind of fill the gap.
Yeah.
So, if somebody asks you, what is your book about, how would you say that in one sentence?
So, my book is particularly about women and their role in terms of navigating these socio-political shifts. What has happened earlier is that whenever there was an incident or an event happening in Kashmir, none of this has been recorded in literature through a woman's perspective. Say, for example, when different political parties were coming to power, elections were happening, and Article 370 was abrogated, Burhan Wani was killed. All of these events, women were doing something or the other. They were navigating their ways in their daily
Right.
lives, and of course, through these episodes of curfews and stone pelting, women were there present. I was also in college navigating how I am supposed to start the morning, go to the college, come back. It was a challenge for me as well. But all of this is not recorded from a woman's lens. What was she doing while
Right.
everything was happening? Say, for example, we talk about men saying that, they were unemployed, they were sitting at home. There would be a narrative saying that young boys, since they were not working, they were out stone pelting, they were associating themselves with the radical elements. But what were women doing?
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it. So it's my attempt to sort of record something in history which would go down the line for other women to understand that how our generation of women and a generation ahead of it were sort of conducting their lives in this conflict situation, and I'm trying to sort of record the account for that.
Asking this question as a reaction
Hmm.
purely out of interest. So, would it be right to say that as much as we study that how much men are radicalized or, uh, kind of made to understand things as a childhood, a woman or a girl is equally radicalized and has similar impacts?
Yes, I
Right, that
think
makes a lot of sense because that's what makes the entire Kashmiri society react the way
yeah,
they
in
do.
fact, people would be surprised when I talk to people about this that women are mostly they interact at homes in private spaces, right? They are the first point of contact for a child to understand certain things about this world.
Right.
So if a woman is radicalized, it would obviously impact a child's mind. There have been a lot of instances where women were coming from that mindset, and it ultimately the kids were groomed into the similar set of thoughts. Probably the male energy, I would say, is of a type that they would want to go out and turn it into action. Women are more into having conversations around this subject, or probably within the four walls of their houses practice something around
Right.
it. But males are usually very excited about turning these things into action. Say, for example, if I talk to my son about something, he would love to go out and turn it into
Yeah.
something, stone pelting incident or anything like that. So it does come from a mother in the house, and that's why it's important for women to be their energy to be channeled in a way that they are the first point of contact grooming the generation ahead.
Right.
So if they are groomed well, the younger generation of this society is going to be better. But if they are not groomed in a way what modern society expects, then we are in for a soup, of course.
So there is conscious and subconscious indoctrination, but
Hmm.
how each gender reacts is completely to its own, and that kind of molds the way ahead.
Yes, yes.
So if you get a chance to have coffee with
Hmm.
one of the Kashmiri women, who would that be and why?
I think this might sound very radical. I would say Asya Andrabi,
Right.
because I have met a lot of women in Kashmir during my field work, and I was also interested in meeting her as well to understand what is really up with her brain,
Interesting.
because this is something. Say, for example, the women who are locally teaching or are homemakers, I understood a perspective from them that this is what they were taught, or this is the system they're coming from, or probably the religious teachings they have interpreted their own way. That's how they're functioning. For Asya and Ravi, it takes me through a surprise each time, because knowing that this woman has been so radical and involved in such heinous crimes, I would say,
Right.
she cannot even give the Islamic identification of it. Say, for example, if she tells me, I am not a Hindu woman, I'm a Muslim woman. If she tells me that Islam teaches us so, I'll counter her. Where is Islam teaching you this?
Yeah.
So I really want to sit with her face to face, asking her certain questions, that the type of things you're teaching people, where is it coming from? Of course, as security analysts, we understand that this has to come from a very terrorist point of view, or
Security angle.
yeah, security angle. Plus, these people are funded for this. Let's be honest. But the face of it, where she is telling people that she is doing it for pro Azadi movement, or she is doing it for people, for Islam, I really want to counter her there, face to face.
I think that would have been a wonderful conversation. You will need more than a cup of coffee
Yeah.
on that. While writing the book, what surprised you the most in learning about your own homeland?
Uh, so while writing my book, the one of the, I would say, traumatic parts of this book has been going back to my childhood, and to position myself. So usually what we do when we move ahead in our lives, we some days forget that we are coming from a position. Say, for example, I am a Kashmiri Muslim woman. There are a lot of brackets.
Too
Some days,
many segments to an identity.
yeah, so some days I would not, probably this doesn't cross my mind each day, right? But when I was writing my book, it's like going back to these brackets again. And then talking to these women made me realize that, you were touching parts of your childhood, probably, which you would not otherwise want to
Right.
touch. And then, as a researcher, the morality of this is that while you're a Kashmiri Muslim woman, you don't also have to sort of go into a very biased mindset in terms of thinking whatever they're saying is either completely right or wrong.
Or
There
wrong.
has to be a nuanced approach to this. So it's always Kashmiri Muslim woman in a conflict with a researcher, I would say. And that has been the toughest part of this book,
Right.
because my positionality would have suggested otherwise in certain hypotheses, but my research and my rationality towards research says something else. And as much as I think while writing, I realized that uh, this has been one of the challenges. But then this has also helped me to cover certain angles is in this book which I would have otherwise missed.
Right. So, Tehmeena, if you could share with us, what was that moment where you realized that this book has to be written?
So, to be honest, I think I always had this thought in my mind that I want to write a book on Kashmiri Muslim women, and this thought had been there when I was in my 10th class.
Okay.
Uh,
16 years.
yeah, 16 years
Not
of
bad.
age. And I had told my father those days that, I'll write a book on Kashmiri Muslim women. I was too young to think in terms of academics, that how do we
Right.
shape a
Okay.
book, how do we shape a thought around it, how do we even write. I was not aware how do we write, I was not in academics. I think this was part of my PhD writing practice, that I finally understood that I can sit and write a book. I had a lot of thoughts anyways going in my mind, and it was coming from my personal experiences, what I have experienced over all these years in that place. On top of that, learning how to write and how to shape narratives.
Right.
That was very important. But this thought was always there. It finally took shape in terms of thinking that now it has to be on paper before 2 3 years. And it has been, in my mind, it has been a very long journey of always sitting on this thought that I have to write this. And I finally gathered some courage and some data before 2 years to put it on paper.
Wonderful. Uh, what would you say was more challenging? Was it the research part, or was it the weight of the stories that you were coming across?
I think the weight of stories, because research part I would consider not that tough, because it has now become a practice that anytime I plan to write anything, even if it is as basic as a policy or a research paper, I love to go on the ground, I love to go on the field, talk to people, and then come up with policy solutions. I would rather refrain from suggesting a policy measure without talking to people and understanding what their problems are actually.
Right.
So that has become a sort of reflex for me, that has become a practice for me. But the weight of these stories were it was too difficult to
different.
deal with. My practice in research, I'm an ethnographer by practice, so I sit in
Wonderful, yeah.
field for like 2-3 hours talking to one person. So to sit with one woman talking for 2-3 hours, and it ultimately, I reached to my question probably after 2 hours. Before that, it's her sharing her stories, what went through her childhood, the
And in that
conflict.
process, they probably give you the context also,
So
which
I usually go with a very
flow.
semi-structured
Yeah.
questionnaire, because I have noticed if you ask them flow of questions, they won't be very comfortable in answering,
Right.
because it's a very structured model and they feel it's very formal, so they'll behave formally. If you take a semi-structured questionnaire in your mind rather than taking a paper,
Paper.
they'll be very comfortable. You'll have to navigate it with them in conversations, like you're asking about their family, their kids, their childhood, what they
Their
have
comfort
experienced.
zone.
Yeah, once we reach that stage, finally I can pose questions around identity, around conflict, around religion, probably, and
Yeah.
that is after 2-3 hours of conversation. So 2-3 hours of me being a sponge, sitting there taking
Yeah.
everything, does take a toll on your mental health, I would agree, because I have time and again said that ethnographers need therapy the most, because we deal with people each day
Absolutely.
and then sit with them for hours. We carry all the stories with us, so it's not easy to go back home and sit with those stories.
Would you say that there was any one particular interview that left you speechless?
I have actually interviewed women, which I would not like to name, of course, because of their
Absolutely.
sensitive nature. So I have interviewed women uh, who have been navigating or trying their best to get rid of radical elements inside their homes while simultaneously being sexually abused by the same person. So
Okay.
that's something which I couldn't actually take, because, say for example, I'm sitting with this woman and she's telling me that her husband was an ex-militant or her son was an ex-militant.
Right.
She doesn't like his nature of work. She wants him to
Change.
change. But simultaneously, another friend of this ex militant, who is a militant right now, is coming home and sexually abusing her, and he's fine with it. That's something I have no words for it, because it's like the very system she is trying to fight with, and the person from the system is coming and sexually abusing her.
Right.
There is a lot of power at play, of course, because she cannot speak against this person. A person who has a gun in his hand, how can you speak against him?
True.
So, if she even tries to tell people that he's sexually abusing me, he'll come and kill her.
Yeah.
There's no big deal about it. And then the husband is aware, probably there was some monetary benefit involved in it or whatever, because he has been out of militancy, he's not doing anything. He
Right.
needs to support. So, this was a monetary benefit thing for him. But in this situation, we are not understanding what a woman is going through.
Very unfortunate.
And then these these are the type of women precisely I'm talking about, that we are not recording experiences of these women. We are not, in fact, thinking that the experiences of these women can probably serve as an example of what should not have happened,
Right.
or probably serve as indigenous knowledge contribution, because even feminist theory and feminist knowledge, there are a lot of feminist theories which have evolved from local practices and from daily lives of women, which ultimately turned into feminist texts. So I
Right.
believe such experiences would also serve as feminist text in later.
Absolutely, it gives a
But
vast.
there are no people, I would say, around who are recording all of this in terms of literature.
Do you think that's also because it's a difficult terrain, or because they're not interested? Because they don't.
It's a difficult terrain, but I have also observed in this place that people are very. I would not say that they're okay with militancy. That would be again a very,
Broad thinking.
yeah, that would be a broad statement. But to be even comfortable with your conflicts is something what happens in a conflict which is there for so long. Say for example, if you have a headache for 2 days, it might be uncomfortable, but if you have headache for 1 week or 2 weeks, you will start being okay with it. So that's what happens in conflict zones.
Getting accustomed to it.
They're very immune. Say for
Yeah.
example, conversations around it has become very immune for people. Oh, it's happening in every corner in Kashmir. You talk to a woman, she'll be like, it's happening here, it's happening there. No, okay, they won't treat it as big deal, or probably the academics there would try to explore it as a subject, but it has become an everyday
They're not
story.
surprised by the
They're
developments.
not.
I think in that sense you're doing a wonderful job, because I don't think these women would have. It's also important who's interviewing them and speaking to
Hmm.
them, and
Yeah.
they may not open up to a man.
Hmm.
So a man trying to get into this kind of literature
Hmm.
may find it even more difficult and may not have all the information.
And
Whereas I think you have
I
managed to
think
do
for
that.
women as well, because all the literature available for South Asian conflicts, even
Right.
the Routledge books and all the Sage journals and everything, you will see the sociologists and conflict analysts who are writing these books are either people from West, or else if they're South Asian people from the Indian subcontinent, they're living in the West.
Right.
So these people are not the set of academics who are there on the ground. There were only, I think, 2 or 3 females who have been there for field work, but then they went back to their universities in US and London and sitting there and writing. I would not say that I have exactly a problem, like I have a problem with that, but to look at a place from a very far off angle would not probably give you the exact details of it.
Right.
And the problem with these conflicts is that Kashmir, particularly, has been often seen from a very Western lens. The conflict has been seen in a very Western mindset. What I am also trying to do through my book is to evolve it into a very Eastern thought,
Right.
rather than succumbing to what Western sociologists have told us about conflict. It is a tough practice because when you try to contribute to something which is new,
Right.
it does bring you a lot of contradictions along the way. But my overall attempt is until now that I try to focus on Eastern thought rather than Western thought.
I think in this particular context, your identity has played a very important role.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
the factors you mentioned, woman, Kashmiri,
Mm.
Muslim.
Mm.
I think it, if nothing, it has definitely brought out a flavor which is much needed to understand the situation of the society.
Yeah.
So, congratulations on
Thank you.
that. Uh, was there any particular chapter that you kept rewriting, you would say, or rethinking because it was too personal or difficult to pen?
I think the first chapter itself, because the chapters following after this were
Right.
particularly about socio-political shifts and then the policy implications of it. So when you write that as a practice, it's easier. But the first chapter is more of a sort of mix of each of these chapters evolving into a personal sort of experience.
Right.
So while I've written chapters on Burhan Wani, I've written on Article 370 abrogation, I have written on elections and then the policy recommendations. The first chapter itself was a combination of all of these, involving how I reached this position of writing,
Yeah.
and how in what terms am I trying to now build around it. So the as I mentioned, the first chapter goes back to my childhood,
Right.
where I have written about being a difficult daughter, where I have mentioned about having, in fact, the internal conflicts with my family each day, where I was trying to make them understand that every child is different in their own way. So I was navigating external conflict, and I was also navigating the
Internal
internal conflict.
conflicts.
So by the time I was writing the first chapter, I had to touch the internal conflict again, to revisit the thoughts of being a rebellious daughter, to revisiting the thoughts of the fights with my father, and to reaching a point where I would have told my family or the society that probably I'm not born with the I would say with the personality of being a good Muslim woman. I don't know what good Muslim woman is
There is no
exactly.
definite definition for that.
Yeah.
Um, your title is very fascinating, Defying Dualities. What duality would you say in your life or personality that resonates?
So for all of these Kashmiri women, and that's also what I resonate with, is that while we are navigating through these systems, some of us try to leave the society, go into other cities for work or for education, and then we mingle with other cultures. So, by the time we're mingling with other cultures, we are also trying to keep our own identity, our own culture
Intact. Right.
intact. So, we are sort of living dual lives, where I don't know whether we are doing justice to both, or are we supposed to do justice with both the personalities. But we are trying to, and each one of us in its own way is living dual lives, I believe. I I have reached a point where I would say that anybody who tells me that they are same internally and externally, I would not believe that in current situation. Each one of us is at some percentage being dual with our things. So for women from conflict, I believe they're doing it more because they are carrying the traumatic incidents of conflict with them, and then they're trying to practice a very modern outlook in cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, living there, mingling with cultures. So their dualities, this is something which is constantly with them, and this is something I resonate with, because I am someone who has been born and brought up in Kashmir. I shifted from Kashmir to Delhi. I got married in Delhi, so I have mingled with another culture. By the time I am sort of understanding a different culture, I am trying to stand on my own culture as well. So I am living a dual life. In fact, at this point, I think that my first half of my life and the second half of my life are two different worlds. I was a I was a hijabi child who would just do whatever parents would tell her to do,
Without
but
questioning.
without questioning. But there was always a rebel inside me. I would fight, but ultimately I reached a point in my college days. Of course, age is in your favor, so you try to speak more, and then I realized that this is not suiting me. I don't resonate with anybody locally, and that did come as a breakthrough. So while I'm here as a person who looks back to my childhood, I I don't even remember how I was there and how I was practicing that life. Not that I have something against hijab, but that was not something for me.
Right.
So when I look back, I have lived your lives. So that's how I resonate with this book.
Just to add to what you're saying, I also feel that uh, it's okay to
Hmm.
be obedient, but it's
Hmm.
very important to ask questions.
Yes.
And that's not really about being rebellious, it's about questioning to understand your rights and duties.
Hmm.
Both go hand in hand. And if we don't understand what we are doing and what we are, what we are asked to do,
Hmm.
we will never know what is expected of us in reality and what is it something we actually desire to do. It's important to differentiate, I
Yes,
think.
and I think one of the indications of a child who is very probably creative or is going to pick up an intellectual line is
Right.
that by the time they're developing their cognitive
Yeah.
abilities and their abilities to question, they would also be able to sort of work through different contradictions and to hold contradictions together. So that's one of the signs, and I was always in that position. So that's how it developed.
You mentioned that the women you have spoken to and have discussed in your book navigate through silence and
Hmm.
speech.
Hmm.
So, in your view as the author, would you say that silence is powerful and when it is imposed?
I think silence is powerful, but I believe that silence would serve as something if it is documented. But if silence doesn't translate into anything, even in your private space,
Right.
then it doesn't mean anything because uh,
You're only probably allowing or adding fuel to fire.
yeah, and if you're silent, say for example, if I know certain things and I'm being silent about it, if the current situation doesn't allow me to speak, that's something else. But if I'm silent about it forever, how did I contribute to any sort of knowledge? And how did I contribute to anything? How did I transfer my thoughts to anybody? So that silence would not translate into anything until and unless it's not documented.
So, taking cue from what you said, uh, how would you say resistance looks like when it's not dramatic or visible?
If you want to look at resistance which is not dramatic, you will have to see, you'll have to look into the everydayness of women.
Right.
Because women by default, now I'm not being a feminist here, but women by default are multitaskers doing a lot of things. So if you look at women in conflict, their everydayness is a testament to what they're doing.
I think medical science neurology explains that woman is better than multitasking than men.
Yeah, so
So
in
you don't have to be
conflict,
a feminist for that, but people perceive it in different ways
yes,
nowadays.
yes, and more for conflicts that their everyday lives and their everyday how they're conducting their lives in private spheres is something. If you look at it, you'll understand what resistance is.
Why do you think conversations about Kashmir often overlook women's experiences?
Because security and politics takes the center stage, and that's something which comes as a surprise for me because uh, all these Kashmir experts we have in mainstream and all these politicians even we have, uh, there there's not much conversation around women and their experiences and their role in leadership, I would say. The current political parties, I don't want to name anybody, but the current political parties, the current politicians and the people we have, they are not talking about women, they're not talking about women's experiences.
Right.
Even the mainstream political parties, I can count like handful of women. There would be maximum 10 women leaders who are, you'll see them in media or speaking around about education and other things, but the lives of women are not discussed. Their daily experiences and how we can make their experiences better in a region like that are not discussed. So I think either it's the local politics, regional politics, which takes the center stage. If we are looking at Kashmir through Delhi or at a larger perspective through India, it's mostly the security perspective. And in security, also, the problem with security studies is that it somehow, on some days, overlooks the human
Right.
experiences.
Uh, you know, what would you say has been one of the most inspiring act of resilience that you have encountered, which may or may not have reflected in your writings?
I think my mother, because I also have childhood experiences of, I have witnessed militancy, of course. And my father, he has also experienced the uh, the incidents where militant, so earlier in 90s when the militancy was not properly funded through a structured network, these local guys who used to join militancy would come back and ask for money from local businessmen. That was the
Okay.
structure, because they didn't have a free flowing finance network earlier when they started in 90s. um, I was then, coming to late 90s, I was somewhere around 6 or 7, and my father, he was a businessman, so I would see, and I've heard from my mother, people coming in asking for money. So my mother has seen these militants firsthand, and also has seen that how they beat a person in front of your eyes.
Right.
My mother had been pleading that, you leave my husband, and she has seen all of it. And then in later stages, she also saw the business going haywire because of curfews, because of lot of things. So if I am asked, that the personal experience I have of resilience, and that would be my mother, because a lady I know is so creative in nature, but she couldn't pursue any education or anything, because how our mothers are taught
Yeah.
to be just these
Selfless.
selfless homemakers. That's what she has done. But I see through her, because part of my creativity comes from her. She's a good singer. She loves movies. She loves fashion. She has always been like that. But
Wonderful.
she couldn't practice herself, her authentic self. One, because of the society she lives in.
Right.
Two, because of the marriage, and she was supposed to be a mother first, a wife first, a daughter-in-law first, then be herself.
Herself.
And in between all of this, I think she lost herself. And since she has also witnessed militancy and all of that, I think if I was at her place, I would have lost it.
I think it says a lot about you as to how you have perceived things from a young age at home,
Yeah.
and then you also saw what's happening outside.
Hmm.
Seeing what happens at home
Yeah.
makes a lot of difference in our mindset.
Yeah. Yes.
We will come to our last segment of this conversation, which is a rapid fire round.
Hmm.
And I'm going to quickly ask you some questions and know your thoughts about it.
Hmm.
One word that describes Kashmir:
Dynamic.
tea or kawa?
Tea.
A book every student of conflict studies should read.
A book, I think, if particularly focusing on women and conflict, then Lion Woman of Tehran.
Nice. One stereotype about Kashmiri women you want to challenge.
The stereotype around our face, that they look good but they're not intelligent.
Well said. Mountains or cities?
Mountains.
Archive or fieldwork?
Fieldwork.
One thing that gives you hope.
Young generation.
One question nobody asks about Kashmir but should.
I think the everyday lives which have not been discussed.
If defying dualities were a color, what would it be?
Yellow.
Why so?
Because yellow is a very happy and hopeful color. It's also something which can be associated either with spring or autumn. But yellow gives me, again, yellow is a very hopeful color. So it gives me hope when I look at my book that it contributes to something. So yellow.
Beautifully put. What next after this book?
Another book.
Well done. Thank you for conversing
Thank
with
you.
us. Welcome to the show, and I hope your book does really well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Please don't miss out on buying Defying Dualities, which will be published later this year.